there are seats up here, and then there are some seats over here as well. If you want to I like to be an antisocial sitter, so if you'd like to sit on this side, you may as well. So good evening. Welcome to the first faculty reading of Cherry Tree. Tonight, Raul Palma and Janine Joseph will dazzle you with their linguistic stylings. They also agreed to take karaoke requests. So be thinking about, oh, you didn't know that part? Oh, it was the writer, right? Yeah. All right, and I will have the honor of introducing them. Very quick announcements are, if you have a cell phone, please silence it now. You don't want to be that person, but their phone goes off in the reading, you know? So there are seats over here, and there's some seats there as well. So yeah, just... Can I sit there? Yes, you may. And also, good on you for asking about the comfy seat. Although, I will tell you, in years past, we had really terrible seats. Like really, really terrible seats. Everyone at the conference said, oh, please change these seats or we'll never come back. And we showed that to the administration and they let us buy these chairs that I tried to buy for 3 years. In case you want to know what it's like working at a college. All right, so you have your phone silenced, good. And also, if you are Adeline or Caleb, you have shirts waiting for you. You get to pick up afterwards, okay? And is Audrey here?
Hi.
Hi, hey, you have a book set at the table.
Is that what I want? I got message saying I want a raffle. I was like, oh, I want something?
Yeah, I was being figurative, but now I'm gonna be like, yes, you have a book set. Fionn, also you have a book set, and Christopher. Where's Christopher? Oh, great. Hey, Christopher. You also have one too. So those are waiting for you at the table. All right. Yeah. Santa Claus came early. All right.
I don't usually win things, so that's cool.
Yay! Well, let's clap then. Good. All right. So I will introduce our first reader, Raul Palma, and then after Raul reads, I will introduce our second reader. So you're not done with me yet. Raul Palma is the author of A Haunting in Hialeah Gardens, just out from Dutton this year, and in this world of ultraviolet light from Indiana University Press. He's a member of the fiction faculty at Ithaca College and the Associate Dean of Faculty and New Initiatives in Ithaca College's School of Humanities and Sciences. He earned his PhD at the University of Nebraska with a specialization in ethnic studies. His stories and essays have appeared in many prestigious literary magazines and included in Best Small Fictions 2018. Palma is Cuban American. He lived in Miami for 25 years and has also lived in Key West, Chicago, and Lincoln, Nebraska. Currently, he resides in Ithaca, New York with his wife and daughter. Please give it up for Raul Palma.
Hey, thank you. So good to see you all. That's my phone. I am going to time myself for good measure. And today I'm going to read an excerpt from my novel, a short excerpt, but I also want you to get a sense of something that's complete, so I'm going to read a full short story. I assume this will come in about 20 minutes. We'll see. So I won't talk too much about the novel, but the major through line here is there's a man by the name of Hugo who's in severe debt, and he makes an agreement with an attorney that if he could go to the attorney's house, get rid of the spirits that are there, the attorney who happens to own his debt, happens to be a collection attorney, will forgive him. So that's kind of at the heart of it. But at the heart of the novel also is a relationship with that Hugo has with Melly. So I want to read a little bit about that relationship. Like most people in their generation, Melly and Hugo fucked around a lot before they met, which was why, when they first got serious with each other, They visited Planned Parenthood and got tested for every sexually transmitted disease on the books. They were astounded when the nurse came back to them with 2 squeaky clean bills of health. It was a miracle, they believed, to come out of their promiscuity unscathed. To celebrate, they went to the McDonald's on 125th Street. Melly ordered a McRib. Hugo ordered a 9-piece chicken McNuggets and a vanilla Oreo McFlurry to share. When they were seated and midway through their meal, Melly blurted out, "Not even herpes, we're so lucky." The cafe on that particular day was unusually quiet. She'd spoken so loudly that the cashier/manager had overheard her remarks, and he was appalled. A few booths over, a young woman trying to get her 2 children to eat their food shot Hugo a look, as if to say, "I'm with my kids, do you mind not fucking talking about herpes?" "Babe," Hugo said, "not so loud, okay?" "Please," she said, sucking her teeth, "nobody here speaks English anyway." "Why do you gotta say shit like that? You sound like your aunt." "Listen, what if I'd had something?" she asked. She bit into her McRib, nodded her head. "Would you?" she said, and she took another bite, breaking eye contact. "Would I what? Would you still be with me if I had an STD?" "Yeah, of course," Hugo said. "Well, I'd dump your ass," Melly said. And she kicked him under the table and laughed, and then because that wasn't enough, she threw a couple of french fries at him and said, "Loser." Then she threw some more, nearly knocking the McFlurry over. Hugo didn't appreciate the joke at all. "You ever catch anything now?" she added. "I know it's because you're cheating." "Melly, I would never." The cashier/manager came by and said, "If you can't be respectful in here, I'll need you to leave. This is a family establishment." When he walked away, Melly erupted with laughter. The way she lit up, head up high, confident seeming, terrified Hugo. Was she not in the least concerned that they'd be kicked out? Still, he loved the way that Melly could always unabashedly be herself. As the cashier/manager attended to new customers, Melly took her red Sharpie and tagged Melly and Hugo for life on the plastic seating, careful not to draw too much attention. She made the O in Hugo a heart. "Now you," she said, handing over the Sharpie. "Or do you not love me for life?" "Melly, you're crazy," Hugo said. He was not the rebellious kind. He already stood out. And he hated to do anything that called even more attention to himself. Maybe it was because he'd spent 6 years feeling like the only brown person in Omaha. Even when he got to Miami, Hugo was not recognized as Bolivian, but as Indio. Anyone from South and Central America was. He felt it sharply around Melly's family. The way her aunt could so casually say things like, "Niña, tiene que mejorar la raza," as if he were not there on her couch, El Indio, as Lena liked to call him. He sipped from his soda, nervously, and then seized the marker and drew a little heart over the I in Melly. Though in his haste, it looked more like a blob. "I love you, Melly," he said. "You're about to get us kicked out of McDonald's, but I'd rather be here with you than anywhere else." "Aw, Hugo, you always say such nice things. Don't you have a mean bone in your body?" Melly was right. Hugo had a knack for saying nice things. Months before their wedding, they were going on evening strolls through their neighborhood, dreaming of home ownership and trying to sweat away the pounds. Melly wanted to slim her waist. Hugo wanted to fit into his slacks. They'd been fantasizing about wealth and success and going back to school, and somehow Melly got to complaining about her birth control. Maybe it was because it had rained, and so the neighborhood was infested with swarming gnats, but Melly was in a bad mood. At work, she'd read a clickbait article about a woman whose birth control medication had made her allergic to red meat. It also resulted in an unwanted pregnancy. Melly worked part-time at Banana Republic, and to make matters worse, Priscilla, one of her co-workers, had told Melly that birth control causes blood clots and brain aneurysms worse than vaccines. Hugo could see that Melly was overwhelmed. She was convinced that her birth control was killing her. She was convinced she was going to get pregnant, even if they were being careful. She didn't want to be a mom. She didn't want to be an aunt. Judging by her demeanor, by her accelerated pace, and the way she was swinging her arms wildly, not even looking both ways before crossing streets, Hugo could see that she was really distraught. Before she could go on for long about birth control, Hugo stopped her. They were in some stranger's driveway. the guy in his truck clearly waiting for them to pass so he could leave. Hugo took Melly's hands in his and said, "I'll get a vasectomy for you." He even dropped to one knee as if he were proposing all over again. This, he thought, was rebellious. But it made her family resent him even more for being less of un hombre. It was an expensive procedure, but Hugo went through with it anyway. Afterward, he complained that it felt like a kick in the balls. "But don't you feel sexier now?" Melly said, like in a super progressive way. "I mean, I think you're sexier now. How many dudes would do that?" "I don't know if sexy is the right word," Hugo said, ice pack between his legs. "But look, mira, now we can fuck whenever, without fear of disease or some little monstrous children. I don't know about you, but I'd say this is a major freaking win in our relationship." "It is. But don't you go sleeping around now, don't fuck it up." "Melly," Hugo said, "I can't believe you'd even think that." "Well, good. How about we do it right now," she said, rubbing the length of him, arousing him so that it hurt. Maybe Hugo regretted the vasectomy. But even if he wanted kids, they couldn't afford them, so privately he came to accept his station in life. The efficiency they'd always live in, the crappy car they'd probably own until its engine fell off, and the dead-end jobs they'd always hold on to. It wasn't a luxurious life, but it wasn't exactly bad. They were happy for a while. Then Hugo did betray her. Something awoke in him that he could not control. She never found out, but he could follow their problems to that original transgression, the only real haunting he'd ever known. And now, though Hugo did not believe in the spiritual, he was beginning to wonder whether Melly, in death, knew what he'd done. Once in a dream, she walked into the efficiency's bedroom, gasping for breath. She was in the emerald dress she'd been laid to rest in, covered in dirt. When she caught her breath, she sat on the bedside and said, "For life, huh? You're so full of shit, Hugo." That's just a short excerpt. Thank you. So this is a 10-page story called "Stand Your Ground" from the collection. I had it right here. And now it has disappeared.
And then it just disappears out of the wall.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm close. Stand your ground. After my shift, Rafa would scoop me up, and then we'd go vandalize people's homes. Every night, it seemed we were rolling through the city of Miami, P.D. Pablo blasting, a couple of spiked cherry Slurpees in our hands. We'd take turns leaning out of the passenger window, swinging baseball bats at mailboxes, knocking them clean off. Or we'd dash onto strangers' lawns, in places with names like the Gables or Coco Plum, knocking over fountains and peeling out. We were addicted to breaking things. In a time when it seemed like anything could break, we were intent on making sure. We liked toppling fountains the best. They were the stupidest ornaments. But this kind of vandalism had its risks. It took quite some strength to get under so much stone and water and lift. If you weren't careful, you could trip over on all those wires and lights, or worse, parts of the fountain would cascade on you, and then you'd have to get the rubble off before escaping. This happened to Rafa once. A big old 5-tier toppled right on him. I had to get out of the car and help the motherfucker, and lucky for us, the owners didn't hear the commotion. They didn't reach for their gun and meet us on the lawn, stand your ground style, or maybe I wouldn't be here telling this story. This was Miami, in or around the months following the September 11th attacks. All of the city was covered in those $2 Home Depot American flags. And I don't know why, but something about seeing those colors draped over the city made me and Rafa want to rip out every last one of them. Maybe that's how all this vandalizing started, with me and Rafa driving around collecting flags, collecting so many that in a week we filled 4 garbage bags worth. And when we didn't have a space for so much patriotism, we drove to the Everglades, set them atop cardboard, and burned them all and watched as the wind carried them, still burning, into the dry grass across Miami Trail. We were students at Florida International University, first years. I was circling the drain around the business school. Rafa wasn't even attending classes. We'd sat next to each other during orientation, and poor guy, some righteous acting advisor, took to the stage to patronize us all. Wake up, kids. You're in college now. You gotta have a plan to succeed. Dude was up there shouting out these cliches, trying to rouse the masses, when out of the blue, he pointed to Rafa and asked, how about you? Rafa, who was maybe the only darker guy in the crowd, was not having it. The man asked, what's your major? He even jumped off the stage to thrust the mic in Rafa's face. And what did my childhood friend say, still yawning and rubbing his eyes from the boredom? Guy, I don't know. Well, that must have been the answer that unmotivational speaker had been hoping for, because a dude fixed his bow tie and said, you don't know, your major. What a way to start college. He hit the mark, though. Neither of us were off to a good start. I was still clocking in 30 plus hours at Walgreens, at the threshold of full-time work, trying to do my part to help my mom. I had no time to study. Plus, it was so hard to take college seriously. In one lab, we spent the first 2 weeks measuring the distance between the anus and the mouth of various mollusks. It seemed like one giant joke. In lectures, I could hardly stay focused, and I was certain that I would flunk out by the end of the year. And Rafa, he was doing just as bad. In some Latin American history course, he was learning about castes and colonialism and how sexual violence gave rise to economies of legitimacy. And rather than feeling empowered with that knowledge, he was coming unstitched. In his creative writing course, when asked to describe something tangible in the room, he'd chosen his own hand, its color, a café con leche. And just thinking of the sugar drove his imagination to the Cuban countryside, the plantations, the hands of his ancestors ragged from the machete handle, and the culling of sugarcane. Rafa had said that merely reading the poem aloud made his eyes watery, and he laughed about it, about being a dude on the brink of tears. But then his demeanor changed when he described the professor's feedback. Nice, imaginative, but the assignment was to focus on something tangible in the room. Was I not sitting right there, Rafa asked, in front of him? He probably meant something physical, you know. What, so you agree with him? Aye, Rafa, I told him. You can't take things so personally. Oh yeah, he said. And he told me what happened next. Some dude shared a poem dedicated to a female student in his class. My first thought was, that's kind of cool. I never thought of using poetry for anything like that. And I joked that maybe I should start writing poetry too. But Rafa was angry, and I didn't know why. Maybe I was distracted or bored, but he was getting all worked up over lines from this dude's poems, firm as mangoes and bruised and sunburst and begging for a bite. I didn't mind the imagery, to be honest, and I told Rafa as much. And at this, while walking through campus, right in front of everyone, he said, fuck you. What? Why? Because you don't even know how ignorant you are, he said, with such authority. I like mangoes. The woman walked out of the class. He was writing about her body, you idiot. Harsh. Something was changing in him. We'd be watching television or something like we'd done a gazillion times, and J-Lo would come on in some performance, and I'd say, look at that ass. And Rafa would smack me really hard. Dude, you gotta be like that? I guess he thought I was objectifying her. I'd only said it because we'd always said shit like that when we saw J-Lo. It didn't take long to feel like we were on the outs with one another. The school year had barely gotten rolling, and he'd started hanging out with new people, the kind of people who stand outside fraternities in the heat with signs like real men take no for an answer, and my dress does not mean yes. I made fun of him for that. And he didn't appreciate the jokes. More so, from what I could tell, he stopped going to class entirely. Every night I'd be like, yo, Rafa, we gotta make some time to hit the books. You know, it's been a while. I missed him, if I'm being totally honest. I'd grown up with the guy my whole life, but he had no interest in studying, and the things he said scared me. One time he came right out and responded, what for? What can college even really offer me? Then after a long pause, he said, you know what I miss? Driving around and fucking things up. So that's what we did every night. By the time the Twin Towers fell on September 11th, neither me nor Rafa were particularly shook. If I'm being totally honest, it was such a huge fucking relief that the world could actually end. My parents were at work already, Rafa was over, and we were having leftover Taco Bell for breakfast, watching the buildings fall to A Tribe Called Quest, Can You Kick It or Can I Kick It? Even if my manager hadn't called to say the store was closed, I wouldn't have shown up. I wouldn't have shown up to class either. After breakfast, Rafa and I drove to the beach. We walked the shore and smoked, and he asked, can we do what we want now? Do we have permission? It seemed that way. It seemed like the tragedy had cleaved a hole in Miami large enough for us to hide in. It was the first time that I looked at Miami, its skyline, and thought, would it be so bad if the planes had all crashed here? Down the street, there was this Muslim kid named Sohail, a tall high school senior who loved sneakers and Star Trek t-shirts. He was by all accounts a giant dork. Neither me nor Rafa had ever given him much attention, even if we were neighbors. But after the attacks, we started hanging out. He was good for scoring an ounce on short notice, so one thing led to another, and before long, he was part of the crew. We'd even take him to vandalize things, and boy, was he a menace to society. One time, while sitting in a drive-thru at McDonald's and waiting for our food, he jumped the fence into the playground and under the cover of night, ripped the Ronald McDonald statue out from the ground. How he didn't get caught, how any of us didn't, I have no clue. Because next thing I knew, food in hand, we pulled up by the playground, and there was Sohail, popping the trunk and loading Ronald into the back of Rafa's Ford Bronco. It was such an excellent night, cruising around town, jamming with McDonald himself in the back. But when the party was over, we had to say goodbye. We drove up to the top of the Rickenbacker Causeway, a tall bridge that arches over Key Biscayne, and we threw him off and into the current, watching Ronald McDonald bob and drift out into the dark. That's how things were when Sohail would join us. He didn't just want to destroy mailboxes, he wanted to set them on fire. And he didn't care much for the small decorative fountains that people kept out in their yards. He was more interested in the large and extravagant public ones. In fact, it was Sohail who in November toppled the Coconut Grove fountain at the peak of dinner time and narrowly escaped as the community's heightened security descended on him. Just to be an asshole, he did it shirtless, wearing a black turban and yelling, yeah, 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 yeah. The guy even made the news. Muslim terrorist targets fountain in Coconut Grove. It was legendary, and we all had a good laugh. So understandably, we were saddened when Sohail stopped hanging out with us. Dude wouldn't even pick up his phone. Turned out his parents found his stash, and by the time the holidays were upon us, he was so grounded he couldn't even look out his window. By then, most of Miami had unboxed their Christmas decorations. All of the city shimmered at night. It was merriment galore. So many lights, so many inflatables and nativities and you name it. It was enough to make us forget about flunking out and dead-end jobs and all the injustices we'd witnessed in college. We suspected that's what the decorations were for, to hide all the ugly of the world and help us stay distracted. How badly the country wanted to move on. We were bored. Everywhere we looked, there were decorations too joyous and beautiful to smash. Until one day, there was only Christmas nonsense on the radio, and we were jamming to Last Christmas for like the 5th time. And I said, Rafa, bro, pull over. So he did. And I walked right through someone's winter wonderland of a yard, right up to a plastic Santa, the same rosy-nosed kind my parents had when I was a kid, and I punched it in the face, my knuckles crushing through into the hollow, illuminated space. It was glorious. My fist was bleeding, and Rafa was laughing and hollering and looking around at the string of lights, the inflatable snowmen, and the rows of candy canes. I knew what we'd do next. We'd turn our attention from fountains to smashing Santas. So we started out small, yanking Christmas lights off trees and rooftops. One night, we realized that we could redecorate people's homes so that it seemed all the decorations were having an orgy. It was utter bacchanalia what we were after. We could have an illuminated deer humping the Virgin Mary, and we could have Santa humping the deer, and we could duct tape Jesus and his little pecker to Santa's face. The possibilities were endless. And at around the time that some shit-faced British dude hid an explosive in his shoe on a flight to Miami, we really hit our fucking stride. It was classic. Our favorite activity, dubbed football practice, involved tackling the inflatables. It was super fun. Just find the neighborhood that's Christmas heavy, you know? And you park at one end, then you walk over to the other. This works best when it's you and a friend because you can race and you could keep a tally of how many figures you've tackled. Rafa and I would line up, each on different sides of the street, Then we'd count to 3 and begin the mayhem, diving into every inflatable character along the way, grabbing Santa and body slamming them or jumping into Mickey's faces. Even if these are sacks of air, the activity can be a bit iffy, because most of these inflatables are actually anchored to the ground, so when you tackle them, the anchors come loose, and then they can gouge the living shit out of you. It happened to me. Luckily, only nicked me, but got my genes good. I dragged Mickey half a block. The fucker wouldn't let loose. When I jumped in the truck, I took him with me. Like anything though, eventually the thrill of Christmas bashing grew dim, and we began to eye larger targets. We spent a weekend visiting local dealerships at night and slashing their mega giant inflatables, the kind you could see blocks away. Those were so dense with air that when we try and tackle them, we'd just bounce right off. That's why we used my steak knife, my favorite thing. When the big ones start to come down, it looks like they're gonna crush you. They just buckle over and descend upon you from like 20 feet in the air. And there's no thrill like running wildly with all that hot air blowing up dust and dirt. Did it make me a little sad? Sure. I'd been a kid once. I knew what it meant to pass one of those mega inflatables on the highway. Parents bickering, a little hope and Christmas cheer looming over the whole stretch of the city, but fuck it. In our headspace, we needed it. Hell, given the chance, I'm not sure we'd balked at hitting one of the towers ourselves. Maybe we would have destroyed Christmas that season for all of Miami. But one night, on a routine job rearranging someone's yard, cops showed up. They rolled into the neighborhood real slow like, lights off, and we didn't even see them until they were really up close. It was Rafa, in fact, who shouted, "Pigs!" Lucky for us, we'd become cautious and we'd parked on another block. So by the time the police lights blasted on, we'd already dipped over a few yards into our getaway and we'd fled. But that next morning, we were heated. All the news channels took a break with the Muslim extremist bullshit to cover our Christmas bashing. It was a big news story. Reporters had descended on all of Miami, interviewing people, collecting surveillance tapes. The police even put out a reward for anyone with more information that could lead to an arrest. Suffice it to say, we were in deep shit. And rather than venturing out each night to kill the town, we'd gather around the TV at Rafa's place and watch the news. Seeing kids sob and tell their stories about ruined Christmases made us a little sad, of course, but we also loved the attention. We loved the feeling of having done something in secret, of having gotten away. Sometimes the news stations would play grainy videos of us in action, and it was glorious. It was like reliving the Christmas bashing. And there was something else that was happening. Our violence was bringing the community together. Neighbors were chipping in and replacing each other's broken Christmas decorations. Look, I told Rafa, it's like we're the spirit of Christmas. But the attention scared us plenty, so we stopped, kind of. The last time we fought Christmas was at the start of the spring semester. Anyone with decorations still out, we'd reasoned, deserved a bit of ultra-vandalism. I'm not sure what got us back into smashing Santas. I remember that we were watching George W.'s State of the Union address, and he'd said something about an axis of evil, and Rafa had said, you know what would be an axis of good? Since I'd known Rafa all my life, I knew just what the answer was. Tell me Christmas bash. I know what you're thinking. How could we outdo ourselves? What was there beyond football practice and the toppling of mega inflatables at the dealership? In truth, not much, but there was something unresolved. It was more of a joke. Certainly not something that would draw attention. I still remember when the seed of this idea came to me. We were circling our own block, sharing a joint, and I said, isn't it strange that his house is the only one on our block not decorated? Sohail? Yeah, I said. Everyone around here decorates like mad. Rafa laughed. Yeah, man, fucking Christmas Central, bro. Know what? We should decorate his place. Just imagine how he'd react. Bro, Rafa said, driving right past it, blunt in hand. Yes, but you really want to eat where you shit? We never done something like this on our own block. I don't know. What do you think? I think he'd love it. I think it'd make his grounding more enjoyable, I said. But then I second-guessed myself. We were wanted, after all. And I told Rafa that we should definitely hold off, even if we missed the dude. Still, it didn't stop us from joking about it. It should have stayed a joke. So when we did venture back onto the vandalism circuit on January 29th, we were in good spirits. We thought of ourselves as custodians of the city, picking up the mess left over by Christmas. We plucked some of those lighted deer from the Biltmore Hotel, Only the best for Sohail. Then we swung by the Church of the Little Flower, which has a super nice life-size nativity. It was all a bit much, if you ask me, but we managed to pluck out the whitest little baby Jesus, Mary and Joseph. And on the way back to our block, we stopped here and there, gathering strings of light and inflatables. And then near Coral Park, we saw the coolest thing, a pink flamingo figurine with a Santa hat, all lit up. And it wasn't the cheap plastic variety. This was a woodcut, beautifully crafted, smooth to the touch. So we ripped that bad boy out, slid it over the rest of our booty, and feeling good, went to Sohail's place. It must have been 3 in the morning. This time of night, our block was dead. We parked under a tree in the little shade blocking the moonlight, and feeling quite comfortable and at home, we set out to decorate Sohail's place the best we could. We envisioned the Christmas palace, the kind of house that all the people of Greater South Florida would pilgrimage to, just to see it. What a shame that Sohail's family didn't decorate. Their yard was perfect for it. Lots of grass, just a few palms. We found the perfect place for the nativity, in a bed of white and pink petunias by the mulch. And since we hadn't been able to fit the cow and sheep and the donkey in the trunk, we situated the deer around the nativity and the pink flamingo too, as witnesses to the birth of Christ. And all along the walkway we anchored down inflatables of every variety, but we held off on plugging them in because we didn't want to draw attention to ourselves. We worked silently, wrapping lights around palm trees and attaching all these cords together with the extension cords we'd swiped. And before we plugged it all in, Rafa and I just stood there, proud of the work we'd done. We bumped fists, and he said something like, "We've been breaking things so long, I forgot what making something felt like." He was right. I took the end of the electrical cord, the master cord that we had managed to attach everything to, and I walked it over to the side of the house where I knew there was an outdoor outlet. I plugged it in, and Jesus, it was gorgeous. The fans in the inflatables whirred, and the bags of air stirred and rose. That's when I noticed the pigs, fucking devils. They'd been smart this time. They'd likely parked further down the street to avoid detection. All that time we'd been decorating, and little did we know that there were 4 officers closing in on us. Rafa was standing right in front of the doorway, really relishing all of it. It was the most joy I'd seen on his face in years. But I needed to warn him that we were busted. And I didn't know what to do. If I ran up toward him and yelled, it would reveal my position and I'd get busted too. If I fled, then I'd feel guilty for letting him take the blame. And as I breathed and tried to control my heart rate and thought through what course of action I should take, I heard the front door to Sohail's house open, and I saw the shadow of a man cross over Rafa. It was Sohail's father, and he was holding a gun, a fucking real-life gun. Sohail's dad must have been scared, especially with all that anti-Muslim shit that the media was spewing, and maybe building a nativity on a Muslim man's house was a tad insensitive. Couldn't he see, though, how funny it was? Couldn't he see how such a prank would make his son laugh? I don't know how else to make sense of it, because next thing I knew, the pigs drew their weapons. One stepped into the light and shouted, "Put that down, right now." Sohail's father, barefoot, shirtless, and only in his plaid boxer shorts, was trembling. He knew what I didn't know then. So when he eventually did put his weapon down and motioned as if to say something, an officer tased him unconscious. And Rafa, who was on his knees, hands behind his head, gave me the look as if to say, "Just run, man. No use in us both going down." But where could I run to? I saw Sohail step into his yard, sporting his Star Trek pajamas. The guy was utterly dazed by the lights and the cops and the whole of it. He collapsed on his father and sobbed. And I saw another cop draw his weapon, so I hid behind the AC unit, and I waited all night because I was scared. I waited for the police and ambulance to leave, and when all was clear, when Rafa had been taken into custody, his truck impounded, I walked home, showered, and then drove to campus to measure mollusks and their fucking assholes. Thank you.
I will never look at an inflatable Frosty the same way ever again, and I invite you to never look at it the same way again as well. Thank you. Thank you, Raul. Wow, that story took a turn, yeah? All right, so Janine Joseph is a formerly undocumented poet and librettist from the Philippines. She's the author of Decade of the Brain, Alice James Books 2023, and Driving Without a License 2016, winner of the Kundiman Poetry Prize. She's also co-editor of Undocu-Poetics, an introduction, which is an anthology of poetry and poetics. Is it still forthcoming or is it out?
It comes out in September, but it has a new title.
Oh, it does?
Yes.
Oh, no.
HarperCollins retitled it.
Oh, what did they retitle it?
Here to Stay.
Here to Stay. All right. And it is forthcoming from HarperCollins next month, or September, sorry. I'm already in August. What is time? Anyway, Janine Joseph is an associate professor of creative writing at Virginia Tech. Please welcome Janine Joseph back to the mic at Cherry Tree for the first time, but here at the Lit House for the second time. Please help me welcome her.
Thank you for that. Also, thank you for this introduction. I feel like I was like heckling my own bio. What a strange position to be in. How embarrassing for me. It's really wonderful to be back. I was kind of like sorting through my photos from the last time that I was here. I was here for a summer reading in 2017, so 7 years ago. I feel old. Also maybe kind of thankful to the past Janine for getting me here somehow, but thank you all for inviting me back and for welcoming me back to the space. In the workshop that I'm teaching this week, we've been talking about back talks and backtracks and the idea of twins, of doubles, of doppelgangers, and even though I've been largely reading only from Decade of the Brain since the book came out, I'm gonna backtrack a little bit. I'm gonna read two poems from the first collection, Driving Without a License, which is what I read from when I came here in 2017. It seemed to only make sense to start with the book that essentially made the foundation, made the house, that presented the window through which I wrote Decade of the Brain. So as James mentioned, I grew up undocumented here in this country. I lived undocumented for 15 years in a time pre-DACA when being undocumented was largely kept a secret from people. And so this was the life and the world of the collection Driving Without a License. When I was working on this particular collection, I was involved in a car accident and had lost a chunk of my memory. I say a chunk, I'm still not entirely sure how much is gone, because here's the thing about losing your memory is you don't remember what exactly you've lost until someone asks you a question. But my memory has since been spotty, and it can get really bad. Like sometimes people will be like, you know, the movie we watched last week, and I'm like, well, who are you? But that is the world of Decade of the Brain. And when I was writing Decade of the Brain and living in that and writing through that particular experience, I was already a naturalized citizen. But when I was in my car accident, I had to figure out which Janine I was, and I had to figure out the details of all the various lives and all the various identities that had become a part of me. And so I think of these two books as sister books, but there's a portal in Driving Without a License that gave me entry into Decade of the Brain. So I guess I'll start by reading the title poem from Driving Without a License, called Driving Without a License, that has a character named S. And much of this book never names people, because I always thought of every secret keeper as a kind of political accomplice. Driving Without a License. S used to take me down to Cajalco at midnight because I needed to learn how to drive in the dark. He'd pull the Beetle onto the gravel shoulder, kill the engine and the lights, and tell me to get into the seat and start from the beginning. It was worse when it rained. I could never see how or where to slide the goddamn effing key. Okay, he'd say, and again, okay, when I'd crunch the tires around and back onto the road. Watch the white lines to your left, he'd say, when we hugged the lake. The rights, when a car passed with its high beams blinding us both. What was that tune he'd tap against the assist grip when I'd veer too close to the guardrails? He never missed a beat of it. Remember my yellow bug, he once asked over drinks. We hadn't spoken in a long while, but I'd heard he sold it because something in it kept seizing, that he, for the last time, coasted down the hill on inertia and sheer luck. This next poem is called Wreck. Janine, your head might have hit something in the car. Come to and quickly. Opening your eyes might take hours. Janine, come to. When you undress and see the bruises, you'll torque your head again into the dash. But sins you'll forget in the shower, Janine, come to. When you sleep, I know it feels like your brain might be coasting out the window. I know it's an unfathomable horsepower, Janine. Come to. And your chest squeezes you when you breathe or think. When you breathe or think, it's okay that you forget who you are, Janine. Come to. The doctor says touch your nose, count back from 3, and repeat after me. Reel that sense back up your spinal tower. Janine, come to. When bent, bend. When pricked and injected with contrast, bite down on the scent in your mouth like skunk sour. Janine, come to. No, if you take too long, you'll lie wondering who said they'd love to hang by the neck on the family tree, your mother. Janine, come to. Or worse, think what else they might find in your body scanned blue and red on a screen while you lie docked, Janine. Come now, come to. So in selecting poems to read tonight, I tried really hard to kind of find the twins of each poems, or poems that answered the call of another poem, or that brought up a word from a previous poem. I figured I would design my reading around the things that I was making my group do. So I guess we'll see how it goes. I never read the same things over and over, or at least not in the same order. I like for the book to reveal itself to me in very new ways. So this next poem opens Decade of the Brain, and it's called coup contre coup, which is a term describing a type of brain injury. So often this is experienced through whiplash, right? So there's coup and then contre coup. And that's exactly what happened to me in my car accident. I was sitting in the passenger seat, and my father and I were rear-ended at a stoplight. So we were at a complete stop, and the person who hit us, the police estimated that they were going anywhere between 50 to 70 miles an hour. I am like a walking Subaru commercial because my dad was driving a Subaru, and everybody survived. So I'll buy a Subaru. I don't drive a Subaru. I drive a sturdier car that's like sized to like my 5'3" Fury. So this is called coup contre coup, which brings up the Janine. I was at a low ebb when the ambulance reversed along the gravel and the roar traveled to Janine. For days, the churned rocks looped their sound until her brain felt like the surf, and the familiarity lulled her to sleep. Lulled her in the hospital's machines, lulled her in the backyard of her father's home where she swayed in suspension, like the empty hammock at first, then thrashed in the gale, like Odysseus lashed to the masts of me. She could not tell you where I was, though the depths were in her. Wailing where I waited, were the sirens skirting the corner, the vehicle still leagues away from rescue. What I learned, having experienced a traumatic brain injury, is that we know so little about the brain and we know so little about traumatic brain injuries. As one of my doctors or neurologists, I don't remember now, had tried to explain to me was, since there was no scan of my brain in the before, there was no sense making of the brain after. And one of the things I think that people don't really talk about in terms of post-concussive symptoms is that one can feel rage and anger, right? Like I feel like when we read about this, we read about it or we hear about it when something tragic has happened in the news from a football player or someone who's just come home from war. But here I was, a PhD student in literature and creative writing, suddenly experiencing a lot of just uncontrollable rage. And this poem is called Every Good Boy Does Fine. I aimed the lemon bar and pitched it. I framed, then flicked our photos from the wall. I slammed the door, edged the Jersey barrier. I'm sorry. My wrecking hands, I explained. My head of wanting to, I couldn't explain. I said, I understand how someone could, I couldn't explain. So we could laugh, I called myself the Incredible Hulk. But I wanted to boil a bath to kneel into, me and the laughing bubbles bursting discordant. I wanted my childhood of rice to kneel onto. I couldn't explain. Keep a gratitude journal, they said. I confessed. Told them as a child I selected the weapons of my punishment. Told them about the armoire of buckles and wood. How once all night I was punished out. How once all night my temperature dropped by the pool. How then the coaches at school knew what to do with my body built to take a blow and put me on the field on defense. Get plenty of rest, they said. What if, I said, on a loop, what hell was helixing in me, no one could say. In the book I read, a concussion walloped its wife, then swallowed its hammer. I roosted alone in a loft with hardwood floors and floor-to-ceiling windows. From everywhere in it, you could hear me expose the bone. I realize I've built really rough transitions. This next poem is called House Hunters. I spent a whole summer watching House Hunters. I don't know if there's anyone here who does that. It was for sport for me, and I didn't know what I was doing for a while. It was just I was watching a lot of House Hunters. Do we have any House Hunters fans, or maybe no one wants to admit? All right, thank you.
What's House Hunters?
It's people who, it's like a whole TV show built on people who are looking for houses, and so they follow people on these house hunting adventures, and it's they see 3 houses based on what their needs might be, and then they kind of pick one. So it's I don't know how to explain it. It's like The Bachelor, but with houses. Yeah, right? Finding your perfect match. And I was so utterly fascinated, maybe obsessed, because I'm a poet and we build these obsessions. And I just kept telling my friends, I know that there's a poem in this. I feel like this is why I'm doing it. And then I ended up writing a poem about house hunters. So here it is. Rough transition. House hunters. Under the spindlework arch of the wraparound porch, no one ever thinks they'll expose the original hardwood for its kindling. But no one ever likes the wall-to-wall carpets, the disco granites, the open concept. For every wish for character, the toilet, sink, and clawfoot tub of demolition green, there is an equal desire for move-in ready, for a home's lines to be as clean as a bowl. At the bay window, a buyer draws imaginary curtains when she says she wants to feel the outside when inside. Another wants to start a family, so descends the narrowing acreage into the basement she'll make a cave. When one ascends the budget, the other makes to slash her throat with her index finger, and the ruin, I imagine, spills evenly across the split-level stairs. On the couch eating cereal, I see myself flash on the screen gone black between cuts. And soon, I too want to gut the entryway for its potential, want to carve the sweets until what's left is a plait of bones and my stomach full. I'm really obsessed with forms. I like to believe that the Janine from before, the pre-accident Janine, was a Janine who was really interested in formal variety, poetic forms, formal play. And there is a part of me, because I did a lot of research on people who have experienced traumatic brain injuries, and like usually the stories that you will hear are stories of people who like develop suddenly like some kind of thing that makes them a genius, right? Like someone is like hits their head diving into a pool and then they become a mathematical genius. Or, you know, like someone has an accident and the next thing you know, they're this like incredible painter. Or, you know, someone like falls, hits their head, or is hit by someone, or like faints, hits their head, and all of a sudden they know how to speak like Italian when they didn't know how to speak Italian before. Like I mostly like lived in a fog of confusion. I once ate an entire blueberry pie in a single day because I kept forgetting that I had just eaten a slice. And so every time I saw it, I was like, I should obviously have a slice because someone brought the blueberry pie for me and it would be rude not to partake. And then I did that for 20 minutes until the whole pie was gone because I was like really living in a kind of loop. But as the years have passed, I've realized that I've grown to be someone who is compelled by and recognizes patterns, and so I like to believe that part of it is the accident, but also maybe the past Janine was also really interested in patterns. I say all that to say that this collection is full of different forms and formal play, and this next poem is an abecedarian, which is a poetic form that uses all of the letters in the alphabet. And so every line in the poem begins with the next letter in the alphabet. But because I grew up in the Philippines and because my first languages, I should say, since I grew up with English, Spanish, and Tagalog, I grew up with a larger alphabet. And so it seemed like the only thing that I should do is pay homage to the alphabet that I was raised with. And so in the Philippines, we go from L, M, N, Enya, Ng, O, P, Q, R, S. So I've pulled in those particular letters. And I also mention my grandmother, Lillian Leonardo, who was an actress in the Philippines. Also, there's Anthony Bourdain. So I figured if I ended a poem on like eating cereal, watching TV, maybe I should bring in Bourdain. So this is called abecedarian, as opposed to abecedarian, because I love puns, and durians are notoriously smelly fruits, and I've been told if you eat one, you'll never forget having even just like come across it. And I have no recollection as to whether or not I've eaten it before, and people say you would remember, and I'd say, but maybe I wouldn't. So this is called abecedarian, for Abba, which is what I called my grandmother. Bourdain, in the rerun, says the king of fruits, camembert like custard, smells of sun-spoilt death. but the phrase she recalls is dead grandmother, which bites my tongue. How does anyone forget ever eating, ever excavating from the pale lobes of the foie gras fruit, she gasps. We finish the rest of our attachment with this misgiving, Googling images of thorn husks bisected like my own human brain. Impossible to her to sample, then overwrite the funk. Impossible to her that the Janine I was ram-rattled into the Janine I am now. When the concussion receded, I journeyed across Came and Kettle in my habit of skin, immigrant again in this afterlife of a life without my grandmother tongue. In Lake Lillian, I pressed my forehead, but nothing natural bore me. I dub her monochrome now with noise. Ang Doktora, Príncipe Teñoso, Anak ng Kidlat, her whole oeuvre voiced over with what I have left. How does anyone forget? Pollen yellow, the odious pulp I can't qualify on my taste buds. How quick my mouth went dry. At the reunion, we extend the butterfly leaf, reminisce around the table, and in all my stories, she is a monolingual sitcom grandma. When I sketch the time she didn't know it was me telephoning, I flush with my hands two fluencies, the punchline undermined. Even their memories, my memory devours into this vanisher language. How does anyone do anything? I stop asking when I board the plane. In this life, I exist awake until the altitude change exhumes me. Where did she go? Where did I go in that rest? I've heard it's xenoglossy, what happened next. I heard through the pain, faint as zodiacal light, her voice in the air beyond where the body went down. So as I mentioned previously, when I was writing this collection, I was already a naturalized U.S. citizen, but it was something I never had figured out how to write about. I was writing largely driving without a license when I'd been undocumented, when I was a permanent resident, and then when I became naturalized. And so all three of those identities were in me when I was writing about being undocumented. But I never wrote about my naturalization process. But on the 10-year anniversary of being a naturalized U.S. citizen, I sat down and wrote about my dad's naturalization process. So sometimes that's just like how poems happen. And this poem has a running title, so it begins at the title. So I'll read that title again. The night before you were naturalized, we practice an ordinary life. Fresh off my flight, you ask if I have eaten, and I ask you if you are hungry, and we pull into the lot of the nearest restaurant that has something for you and something for me. It's almost spontaneous. We just have to make a quick call to say they can eat on ahead without us. You are seated to face me, and out of habit, I face the window that overlooks the corner and reach of street. I order what I've missed most, and you listen for what is good here, then order what comes recommended. It takes me through the appetizers to not be distracted by the moment's poetry, how I might write a poem titled like that magazine's tagline, "They're just like us," for example. Or a poem set here, against the partition, where I erase you by calling you alien relative, in every instance where the you appears, and I disappear behind the petitioner, in a bit of verse not really for us, but for the paparazzi reading. I focus when I see you fumbling with your grin, your front flipper tooth suddenly chipped in half, which you hand me when I ask what it is you have done. Our dinner bowls arrive, but we are busy rehearsing your backup face for tomorrow's pictures. When we finally eat, a silence settles that isn't silence. You just won't smile, you say, and show me the closed beam you'll make. And I say, I'll figure it out. Don't worry, I'll fix it. And I do. With a needle and a glue, I bond it. And I have just one more poem for you all about a snake. So I'm someone who, when I'm terrified of something, I just walk right into all of my fears. And for a time, I was living in Oklahoma, and I am terrified of snakes, or I was terrified, I don't know. And so I decided I would join an Oklahoma snake network on Facebook, where every night before I went to bed, I would look at pictures of snakes to learn how to identify them, so that I could tell which ones, were venomous. And then I fell in love with a snake called the hognose snake. There are a lot of videos online about the hognose snake. I highly encourage all of you to watch them. They're very, very dramatic, and they will fake their own death when they think a predator is near. And it's really like a sight to behold, and they're so cute, and they look exactly as like their name describes, right? Like they have these little like upturned snouts. You should watch it. Thank you all for listening. Again, this poem too has a run-on title, so I'm just gonna read it straight through. Oh, I'm dying. The disembodied voice ribs in the clip of the snake whirlpooling itself to a fake death. Black, she belches. Blap. As the faux cobra scrapes, underside up along the grass, forked tongue trailing the coil. Oh, I'm dead. But we know it's not. The touch-me-not gapes its mouth long enough to be patted again by the cowgirl who runs one finger a length of ventral scales. With shit, it musks itself, sometimes punctures a bleed in its commitment to being left alone. I rewind to the seconds of its resurrection, when it flits to flee, and pause to admire its hognose of a snout, upturned and useful, subtle shovel in the plot. Thank you.
If anyone could convince me that maybe I could look at snakes online, it's Janine Joseph. This is what literature does, right? It changes the way we look at things. It changes the way we look, right? So please join me in thanking again Raul and Janine for that fabulous reading. Books are for sale in the mural room, and they'll sign. I guess if you would sit in the library, and you can get your books signed. After that, we will have trivia night here on the porch. You'll form into teams and win prizes and play like pub style trivia. And also there will be a pretzel dipping bar in the kitchen along with sodas in the fridge. I wanted to say one thing about bathrooms. We have bathrooms on each floor of the house, so if a bathroom is occupied downstairs, just go upstairs and even to the third floor. That bathroom is particularly creepy. I don't know why I looked at you while I was doing that. Anyway, thank you. See you soon.